Hey, what's up you guys? Ben here. A lot of us watch collectors have probably crossed paths with a Seiko at some point, whether it was recent or in the beginning of our collecting journey. For me, a Seiko 5 was my very first mechanical timepiece, and it really jump-started my love for watch collecting. And back then, I had no idea on anything regarding watches, so I was quite lucky that I started off with a Seiko rather than like a fashion brand. Since my first Seiko, I've gotten a lot more familiar with the Seiko brand, and one element that they prioritize above all else is a great value for the money. The older brother of Seiko, Grand Seiko, is not an exception to this rule, and by extension, neither is the watch that I'll be reviewing today, the SBGM 221. My initial impression, I was pretty darn impressed. For its price point, the finishing was beyond excellent, with a beautiful creamy dial, and an incredible wrist feel to top it off. I've owned many Seikos in my days, and the difference between Seiko and Grand Seiko is grand, no pun intended. The difference in quality is really apparent, and Grand Seiko even rivals watches that are multiples of its price point. The finishing of the SBGM 221 really does outshine anything else in my collection, even Rolex and Omegas. It's really cool to know that a group of artisans spent years perfecting their craft in order to be able to make this watch. You don't really get hand finishing like this until you get to the high horology tiers like Patek or Vacheron. In that sense, you can really argue that Grand Seiko sits on the higher level of horology. And whether you agree or disagree, let me know in the comment section down below. Also, if you're new to my channel, don't forget to subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, and click the notification bell. Anyway, let's jump right in. Let's begin by discussing the immaculate finishing of the SBGM 221. This timepiece was polished with the famous Zaratsu polishing method, which is a highly technical polishing skill done by expert artisans. This style of polishing was introduced to the Seiko family by the designer Taro Tanaka. Zaratsu finishing allows the surface of the watch to maximize its interaction with the light within its flat surfaces, giving an impression of extreme precision with super crispy lines and an incredible level of reflection. Zaratsu didn't originate in Japan though. It actually originated in Germany, and the word Zaratsu is a play on the German machine manufacturer Zalaz. The higher-end Swiss brands such as Patek and Vacheron use a polishing technique similar to Zaratsu, known as black polishing. Both methods of finishing require high levels of precision and technique, and both yield similar results. That's incredible considering that this Grand Seiko goes for a little less than $5,000 US, while a new Patek Philippe costs closer to $20,000. When it comes to case finishing, there's no other watch brands within the similar price segment that can even rival Grand Seiko, not even Rolex. The SBGM 221 houses the in-house 9S66 movement, which has a power reserve of approximately 3 days. The movement carries a GMT and a date function, which are really practical for everyday wear. The watch has a see-through case back to allow you to glance into the beautiful movement. As you can see, the movement is finished really well, and it's worth checking out every now and then. I personally like to take my watch off occasionally to admire the movements of watches like this. The dial of the SBGM 221 is a creamy ivory dial. It's lacquered finish, so the way it plays with the light in different light settings is exquisite. It looks awesome on camera, but it looks way better in person. I have the watch on an aftermarket leather strap for a more versatile look, but the watch comes with this alligator strap. For a brand new strap, this alligator leather is extremely supple, so there should be minimal break-in period if you wish to rock yours on a factory leather. The clasp is a butterfly clasp for a more sophisticated and comfortable look. As you guys can see here, this timepiece comes with its own certification, which I think was a really nice personalized touch, and it just makes the watch feel that much more special. This combined with the more on-hand polishing method of Zaratsu puts Grand Seiko as a brand in the realms of high horology in my opinion. Unlike a plain luxury watch, high horology is a luxury watch that is limited in production by the number of artisans available. A plain luxury watch is a watch for one that is expensive, and for two maintains and holds decent amount of value after it's been worn. For example, you'll never see a Rolex Datejust go for below $100 for example, as long as it's in decent condition. The higher end Grand Seikos are definitely high horology tier without question, but I think this SBGM 221 is up there too. I see Grand Seiko as the Japanese equivalent of JLC, JLC being known as a watchmaker's watchmaker, and for good reason. JLC, just like Grand Seiko, also makes fantastic watches for great value, and in that way they're very similar. Moving on to dimensions, the case size is exactly 39.5mm, the lug-to-lug length is 46.7mm, and the thickness is 13.7mm. The proportions of this watch is, I think, really well executed. My wrist size is 7.1 inches, and I think this watch will fit anyone with a minimum wrist size of 5.5 inches or higher. I think the case size and the lug-to-lug length is just perfect. The thickness might sound a little discouraging, but keep in mind that about a millimeter of the thickness comes from the dome sapphire crystal, and the watch actually doesn't feel that thick on the wrist. The lug width of the watch is 19mm. I was never a big fan of odd numbers for a lug width, but 19mm actually feels proportional compared to the case size of the watch. Also, if you're someone who enjoys putting on aftermarket straps, there's actually a lot of strap makers that sell 19mm straps nowadays, so that shouldn't be a detractor for this watch. Like many dress watches, the SBGM 221 lacks lume, but that hasn't been an issue, at least for me. Despite the odd 19mm lug width, this watch actually gets my approval as a strap monster. I see guys online putting this watch on all sorts of straps, of varying colors and materials, and I think most of them work really well. This watch is extremely versatile as a result. It can pretty much work as a dress watch in any formal settings, or even as a casual weekend watch on those days where you're just laid back. The only area where you don't want to wear this watch to is near a body of water, because the water resistance rating of the SBGM 221 is pretty weak at only 30 meters, meaning it's only about splash proof. Overall, the SBGM 221 packs a punch above its weight class. It's extremely well made, surpassing any rivals within its price tier, and it looks handsome. It's also easily wearable and versatile. The only cons would be the low water resistance rating and the lack of lume. But this is a dress watch after all, and to make up for the lack of lume, the hour indices are razor sharp, and if you look closely, anytime the second hand passes by, you can actually clearly see its reflection on the indices. I usually gravitate more towards watches on either bracelets or rubber, but the SBGM 221 has to be an exception. It looks beautiful, it wears well, and it's surprisingly versatile for a dress watch, and for these reasons, it gets a 2 thumbs up. Let me know what you guys think about this watch in the comment section down below, and as always, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.